We're going to speak English because obviously the directors of Shumba Coal are from Botswana. They are English speaking, so as a sign of respect, we'll keep the session in English. And as somebody from the FSC just told me, the language of finances in Mauritius is English, because I was complaining he didn't speak French. So anyway, welcome. Thank you for being with us. Shumba Coal now is on the development and enterprise market, as you have seen, and they've been there since the 4th of April, and on that day there were 1,000 shares, I think, that were put on offer, and the rate was 12 cents US cents the share. I'd like to introduce the team that is in front of you today, with the apologies of Alan Clare, who unfortunately, the chairperson, had a problem. He was suddenly ill, so he had to stay back. So we have on the table, looking at you from your right side, Mr. Mashali Kumati, who is the Managing Director of Shumba Coal, and in the middle is Mr. Grant Ramnath, who is the Non-Executive Director. Grant, as you know, is a Mauritian national, but has worked all his life abroad and has brought this Shumba Coal project to Mauritius because he believes in his country, and he believes that the stock exchange in Mauritius will offer enough dynamism so that they can go on with their project of raising their shares here on this market. And then we have on your left side the extreme man, Mr. Tapelo Makati. Tapelo is the finance director. So last year they were here with us, so you must have heard a lot about Shumba Coal since last year. We were presenting the company, we were presenting what they do, their activities. There was a lot of press coverage, and by the way, I'd like to thank the press for being here, because you guys did a grand job on Shumba Coal, and you know the directors now by name, individually, so I really must thank you for having believed in the Shumba Coal project. So without further ado, I will pass on the stand to Mr. Mashali Kumati, who will be presenting. Oh, sorry, Grant is going to be starting. Sorry. So Grant is going to be doing the introductions and welcome speech. So Grant, the floor is yours.
I may switch to French and Creole from time to time, as I like to speak in analogies very often. I'm not a mining engineer. However, I've been in the mining world since 2002 in startups that I participated in, especially as it's very close to the mining world. So over the years, there's just a natural attraction. So I think I just want to say a few words about history. It's important to remember history. We have Easter coming soon, and that's about history of who we are as human beings. Mauritius would not exist today if we didn't have Africa, we didn't have India, we didn't have trade flows. I'd like to recommend a book sometime if you want to go and look at the history of Africa. It's called Scandal for Africa. It's a book from the 19th century that describes the European countries going towards Africa for exactly the same reasons we're rushing towards Africa today. Except today it's the Chinese and the Indians who are there first in a very, very big way. Africa represents an enormous opportunity. Everyone's been talking about this in Mauritius over the last 2 years. My own personal experiences, I've been working on the continent since 1992. Directly, indirectly, on and off, but continuously into the African market, from Nigeria all the way down to South Africa. I'd like to say that for those of you who don't know me, I'm also a member of Mauritius, the Mauritius African Business Club, which is a club that is trying to be a bridge with government and policy units to orientate and facilitate Mauritian companies and entrepreneurs who are wanting to deal within a continent that is bigger than Europe and the Americas and South America, but geographically onto it to be smaller than the continent. So we have to be humble as well when we're talking about Africa. and dealing with it. I think it's important that we put ourselves, for instance, into the context. We are very good traders. We have a unique opportunity in that we are highly respected on the continent, our fellow Africans, because we are Africans. We have created a miracle in this country by way of GDP, economic growth, by way of democracy and stability, and respect of each other in a world, in a country where there's quite significant diversity of origins and peoples, and we live together. I think, without going any further into this, I'd like to speak about coal. I think I've touched on the fact that Africa is an opportunity. Now, infrastructure development is at the base of all economic development. You remember our country, those who are older enough here, in the 70s and 80s, the telephones, the roads were down. There was not enough electricity. All these opportunities we obtained growth because we were able to have infrastructure development. And this infrastructure development goes through energy refinement. If you can switch on the lights in the evening in your house, people that switch on the lights will consume, and they will think, they will work a bit more, and you will get economic growth. History has shown, as I described early on, and today, well, coal is a subject, energy from coal is a subject, and well, if we look at our European countries, Germany today is switching off progressively its nuclear to move towards coal, towards the utilization of cleaner, more efficient coal, and it is a cheap form of energy. The Japanese, following the catastrophe, they have also decided to phase out nuclear and to move into coal. That must certainly say something to us. We are in a unique position with unique opportunities. What happens if there isn't enough electricity? Well, we see this in the region. In the Southern African region, we have in Botswana itself, we have power cuts. Today, we have issues, and because of that, the growth of the country decreases. The same thing in Southern Africa. My fellow colleague is from South Africa today. We speak about the power outages that happen and how it affects the mines and affects the growth of the country. Namibia is coming towards problems, so you need cheap, efficient energy. Lo and behold, Botswana has one of the largest reserves of coal, and my colleague Ashari will explain to you that Shumba has quite a chunk of reserve of coal. Of course, with this, we will have issues, like with all economic development. Those issues about whether it's clean, whether it's not clean. You'll have lobby groups saying one thing, other groups saying other things. The fact is, economic development goes through phases. If you take, for example, the south of France, La Côte d'Azur, in the 1920s and 30s, it was beautifully pristine, crystalline waters on the Mediterranean. And then what happened was in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and with the advent of Brigitte Bardot, it became one of the most widely developed parts of southern France. The water got polluted, the fish started to die, the best now cost a fortune. And then years later again, we got into the phase of cleaning up our mess, having gone through economic development. I think we could do some relationship about only now tourism industry in the country today and how it affects our waters, but it's a necessary evil. And so we have the advantage in Southern Africa and specifically in Botswana of starting at a time when we are environmentally conscious. We have the conscience, we know we have to be clean in what we're doing, so we'll do it. But we mustn't exaggerate to ask for absolute cleanness, because even alternative power is now being proven to be not as clean as it could be and not as cheap as it could be and not as therefore economically viable as it could be. one of the most important aspects of this is if I was talking to you about investing into a country in Africa, where would you invest? If I spoke about investing between, I would choose two extremes. The highest level of stability historically proven in investing into Africa is Botswana. It is a country where you have the oldest joint venture between government and private sector. That joint venture is between Botswana, which is the biggest diamond mine in the world, and the government of Botswana. That joint venture, where they share, I don't know the exact numbers, but about 50-50, I believe, in the holding of Botswana, is over 45 years old. It has helped the country to generate and become one of the most economically viable countries in Africa, but more importantly, there has been historical proof of success that the government in Africa can sustain and maintain a relationship with the private sector. So when you're investing, it's your money, it's funds investing, it's pretty stable. I won't talk about the other countries, I'll let you decide where it would be less safe, but pretty much elsewhere would be less safe for money. So having said that, you have the various aspects of corruption and good governance, which are the elements of having the top level of stability that the government was on. That's the first part of my presentation. The second part is going to be as critical, because you can have fantastic opportunities. You can have fish in the ocean, you can have a boat, you can see the fish, you can have the boat, but you need a skipper to go out on that sea to get that fish. And otherwise, that opportunity will not crystallize. And I'm going to speak to you about the management team. The management team is one of experience. Now, just a few credentials about myself, because when a man speaks about something, the most dangerous thing is he doesn't know that he doesn't know. So he actually thinks he knows. And in this instance, I just want to demonstrate that I do know what I'm talking about. I started my own company. My very first, I was 16 years old in an American country. My second, I was 23 years old, and I started my own construction company in France, which by the age of 29 had 18 employees. Subsequently sold off, and I moved to new ventures in my life. I was the managing director of GH Communications from 1992 to 1999. During that time, I grew the company to become the most profitable entity for its size in Africa. It became a standard-setting country, best operating procedures in the world for DHL. Thereafter, I've done business development for HSBC, where people said we couldn't go into certain countries to do investment management. We did. I opened those doors in Africa, in certain countries in Africa. And during my career, and I'll stop there, I've been in startup ventures where I've put my money, my mouth, my experience into various businesses. Some have worked, some have worked fantastically well. And the great success was recently a company that was sold, a copper mine, for, I won't give the amount of billions of rupees that was sold, where I was one of the first round financing. Today I'm invested in Shumba actively. I know the management team intimately. I've known the family for many, many years. So I stand here before you not as only a non-executive director, but also as a founder and a friend, where we spend a lot of time together talking about the business. Most of the time we're together, and it's not during only office hours. I think that's also very important. Our chairman could not be with us today because it was beyond his control, but he is here with us instead. Alan Craig is a seasoned mining professional. I didn't know there were 150 countries in the world when he told me that he had worked in, had experience in. He is a person who is an expert in feasibility studies, in understanding how you build a mine. Now, just a word about this. We are Shumba Coal, a company in mining exploration, where we have established that we have significant amounts of coal. This is all in the exploration phase, and my colleague will explain later. But what I want to demonstrate here is that what you have to have a successful company is the right fit between the competencies of management, the opportunities that lie ahead of that business, and the market context that the business is within. Here I will demonstrate that we have the right competencies and variety of men around the table and the team to take that boat out onto rough seas and bring back a lot of fish. I guess I'm a fisherman, right? Alan demonstrated recently in the dealings that we have to have with consultants that we utilize in the development of the company. It is valuable experience that we were talking about it last night with Mashali, my colleague, who said simply invaluable, the experience which goes well beyond the quality of what he's doing. Mashali is a man that I met in London. He was working for a company that was doing exploration financing. So we had an analyst sitting at the other side of the fence where people approached his company, and he had to analyze and vet and say, yes, this is a good investment opportunity. He did that for tens, if not scores of tens of companies in London. I lived the direct experience of Mashali's competencies in that I was myself an investor in a number of the companies through the company where he was working, and I had the opportunity to sit as an investor opposite Mr. Kumati, who was trying to explain to me why I should be putting some of my own good earned money into some of these projects where it is starting. So I know him directly from a working experience at opposite sides of the fence. To be a juror and to be a judge is something rare and instant and flattered. He has got the skills of I would say, a surgeon. He's clinical. He gets to the point, eliminates all aspects that are superfluous to the situation at hand, and proposes solutions to the board, proposes solutions to management, and then executes those solutions. In an email from our chairman yesterday, that he said he'd speak on Saturday night to say he couldn't make it, a person emailed to Mashali and copied to us. He said to Mashali, Alan is over 55 and highly experienced. He said, you've grown to become a fabulous CEO and with enormous experience. I'm impressed, and you will be fine. They were more than just words of comfort, I can assure you. Kapelo Mahati is South African. He has a degree, we have degrees in accounting, but his degree specializes in mining. So when you start counting, you count for, if you're doing fish, it's one type of counting. If you're doing peanuts, it's another kind of counting. Diamonds is another, and he's in mining. So his very background, you can tell when you look at the intuition that he applies in his accounts, is that it's not mining. It's pertinent to the situation. He's been successful in his mining career. More importantly, him and Mashali have worked independently with each other for years. So when Mashali was building his teams, he carefully chose people in his environment that he had worked with before. And Kapelo certainly came, and we met for the first time a few years ago, and we sat and we looked in each other's eyes, like we do in Africa, and we started to smell each other a little bit, see if we could get along. Marsh was watching this and say, well, do these people get along or not? And this is really the substance. The competence is always there, it's compatibility. And I can assure you, Kapelo is an accountant, but he's a very funny man. He knows how to tell good jokes, which from an accountant I really appreciate. That is the three gentlemen. Then I have three other gentlemen for you who are on non-executive roles. I don't think I need to introduce their jury, who is our Shumba Coal is managed out of a company which is High International Financial Services. Jeff sits on our board, and he is one of the founders of the offshore sector in Mauritius, highly respected, writes the laws and advises governments and groups, and a man of the highest repute for Mahabharata respect. Sipo Ziga is a company lawyer. I know Sipo. He carried Shumba all the way to listing in Botswana, and I think he's on our board now, and he's going to bring another lawyer on the board, and he's bringing valuable experience to them. Then you have myself. I've explained who I am and what I do. So that comes.
Well, I'm not going to be too long, but I think it's important that we go through the actual project and the actual assets. I'll start with our strategy as a whole. Of course, you know we are listed on both Botswana and Mauritius. But what we're trying to do is to develop a company with assets that are very low cost to mine and that are strategically positioned in terms of infrastructure. Now, I'm not sure if you're all aware of this, but Botswana has got the largest, or some of the largest undeveloped coal assets in the world, and definitely the largest ones in Africa. Now, what we're saying is that in that market, that there's a significant opportunity. Historically, the exploitation of those assets has not been what it should have been, in that it's been fairly low. And in the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen interest building up. We're happy to say that we're one of the first movers in the industry, and thus we're trying to put the low-hanging fruits in our pockets, being the low-cost operations. Our first and flagship project is the Shumba Thermal Coal project. Now that has approximately just over 1 billion tons of thermal coal. If I was to put that in context, it's probably enough to supply Mauritius with power for several hundred years. So there's a lot of coal there. And what we have to look at is how do we take advantage of this opportunity. We're looking at a number of avenues to monetize the assets. The first one being through power generation, and the second one through coal exports. Before I get into that part of the discussion, I just want to put up a brief overview of our position. Now, we're currently sitting at about 22 million USD market cap. We're roughly 9% up since we listed on Botswana, and as Grant mentioned, we just listed in Mauritius now. Grant covers the board members, but I think what's also significant is that management holds a significant portion of the company, currently sitting at probably around 55 to 56%. I think this is important because it means that our interests and our objectives are aligned with our shareholders. And we've had experience with a number of exploration companies, both in and as investors, and you find that the most successful ones, a big component of it is that the management's interest was purely aligned with the other shareholders. We do have a number of shareholders already, 265. Mostly out of Botswana, we've got about 8 pension funds on the share register and a number of other institutions. So I think although that the management does sit with a fairly large chunk, we do have a good spread from retail to institutional. And to do with the Mauritian listing, what we will be doing is we want to get more of our equity into Mauritian hands so that it gives Mauritians also the opportunity to participate in the story. Now, to get to the asset, I did mention that in terms of coal, it's a bulk commodity. And with bulk commodities, you really want the cheapest methods of transport to get it to your destination. Ideally, you'd rather not transport it at all and utilize it exactly where it is or beneficiate it where it is. However, if you must transport it, infrastructure is very key, and that's why when we chose our assets, when we chose our assets, over there, what was key to us is that it's very close to existing, there's road and rail here. However, there's also a high voltage power line coming from here and extending into our neighboring countries, Zimbabwe, South Africa, and very soon there'll be one going up this way up to Namibia. So in terms of both power distribution infrastructure, the project is well located. In terms of rail and road, that is also good. Now, before I get into the monetization of the assets, what I'll say is that we've got a lot of coal. We recently upgraded our resource to just 1.1 billion tons from just over 900 million. But what's important is that there was a significant increase in the measured and indicated resources. Now, that has increased to roughly 250 million tons, closer to 270. What that means is that those are the resources that you convert to reserves and that you're actually going to mine. So 270 million tons as measured and indicated, that's enough coal to support several years of either power station or export or whatever you want to do. One of the benefits we do have as well is that where we are, we have abundant groundwater resources, meaning that we should be able to find the water we need for both the power station and mine development right where we are, without having to look elsewhere. And in other projects in the area, water can be a very significant constraint if you don't have it. We're also very advanced in our environmental studies. We've done our baseline EIA, which was approved by government. And where we are now, we're at the final stages of environmental impact assessments, which we aim to complete by the end of this year. So, as Grant explained, we take our role in the country in terms of environment very seriously, and what we intend to do is to be committed to cleaner coal where feasible, of course. And the ways we're looking at this, there are two ways you can deal with your nasties or pollutants in coal. You can either deal with them immediately after you mine the coal, or you can deal with them in the power station. Our intention is to try to utilize both. If you deal with them straight after you mine them, you wash the coal, and that increases the quality and at the same time reduces mainly the sulfur. And in power stations these days, if you want to comply with rollback standards for emissions, you also need to utilize the limestone in the boilers in the power station. So these are both routes that we're looking at in terms of monetization, in terms of environmental considerations. In terms of monetizing actual coal, what we're saying is that we're going to look at this in three ways, or approach it from three ways in parallel. The first route is that, fortunately for us, we are positioned very close to what will be 3 power stations by 2016, which are owned by the government. And there are 2 of them at the moment, and there's one that will be commencing construction fairly soon. So we're very close, about 15 to 20 kilometers from those, and we can fairly easily supply them with coal. One of the things we are looking at, as I mentioned, is that currently the power stations are getting coal from a mine which is not processing the coal first, so they are getting a very high sulfur coal into the power station boilers, which is costing them a lot of money to clean up in the power station from limestone considerations. what we're saying is we can provide them with same quality coal but with lower sulfur, which means that they will save money in the power station. So that is really what we think is the lowest hanging fruit, fastest route to market, is to say we're going to open a hole in the ground and supply those power stations whilst we're progressing our other monetization objectives. So this route is really to get the mine going. However, the second monetization route, which is working in conjunction with an IPP or a mine power station, I think is really the future, because in Botswana and Southern Africa as well, there's severe energy shortages. And what we're saying as Shumba Coal, we want to be producing the cheapest energy in the region so that we are competitive and so that we can also help to contribute to economic growth both domestically and regionally. In terms of how we're going to do that, I did mention that we are very close to these high voltage power lines, and if you look at this diagram, what it will show you is that we've got routes going up here, Zimbabwe, South Africa, and what is quite interesting is that in Southern Africa is what you call the Southern African Power Pool. So there's a network of countries, currently none of them that are connected by a high voltage network of power grid, and through that network you can sell power, distribute power to anywhere else within the area. So these orange countries here, that's the Southern African Power Pool. And as that develops, what's happening, the Kenya will soon be connecting to Tanzania, which means that as soon as that's connected, the Southern African Power Pool will be able to sell into the Eastern African Power Pool, further extending the potential market for cheap power. So I think that's very exciting for us. And I won't go too much on this, but just to say that even domestically, we're going to require either a new power station every 3 years just to meet our domestic power demand. But what I want to touch on is what's happened fairly recently in the last month in the power sector in Botswana. And one of the key things that the power sector, both for domestic consumption and for regional consumption, has been ring-fenced as a strategic sector for the development of the country. Now, Botswana is, as Ron mentioned, is been blessed in terms of diamonds. However, we've been highly reliant on those diamonds, which directly and indirectly contribute to over 60% of GDP. Now, coal and power are where the government is going in order to diversify the economy. And some economists estimate that diversification can end up being, or the sector can end up being as large as the diamond sector. So what's happened recently, the first thing is that in this year's budget, the government has allocated a lot of money, 300 million pula, that's slightly over R1 billion for the development of power infrastructure in this year's budget. And just going back, that will allow, I did mention the power line that is being built, that will allow this line that will go up here and also extend to connect Botswana to Zambia and Namibia to this part of the country. What's also happened is that the BPOPF, which is equivalent to the NPF here in Mauritius, has allocated 15% to private equity, infrastructure investments, and property. But what that means that there will be a lot of money just in that allocation alone, roughly say 12 billion rupees allocated towards infrastructure and power sector development, which again bodes well for companies such as ourselves, which are looking to develop this sector. And the last thing I'll touch on that happened recently in the power sector is that Botswana has actually signed a bilateral agreement with Namibia. Namibia is our neighbor to the west. And it's a very similar country to Botswana in terms of credit rating, in terms of stability. So if Botswana is first, Namibia is second or third in terms of Southern Africa. And basically the two countries have signed an agreement whereby we want to work together to develop our power sector together, and in order to allow power cooperation in terms of coal development for Botswana assets. So that has been very positive for the Botswana sector. And when I say, talking about these developments, this is all in the last 12 months. In terms of the other monetization routes, what we are looking at is the export of coal. One of our seams can produce a very high quality export coal at a fairly high yield. So that is quite strategic for us. And I did mention we're right next to the existing railway line. One thing that's been positive for us, Botswana started exporting coal for the first time last year in April to Turkey. And historically, people thought that Botswana coal was stranded, but that was the first time via rail started moving to Turkey, and that's in a mine that's about 25 kilometers from where we are. So we're right in the center of these new developments in the Botswana export sector. And I'd like to show you what's happening here. So what you see here in the blue, that's existing rail. This goes up to ports in Mozambique, that goes to ports in South Africa. However, what's key is that there are significant new railway lines planned. I'll talk a bit more about this yellow one, which is the one to port in Walvis Bay in Namibia, where we were present at a historic signing between the two governments. And this green line rail here is going to connect again Botswana to a heavy haul line to dedicated coal ports in South Africa. So in terms of recent developments, I mentioned the coal sector as a whole is strategic. PR and TFR, so Botswana Railway Lines has already invested in a 35-meter coal train to transport coal from Botswana to Durban Port. But what's also key is that South Africa, or specifically Transnet Freight Rail, which is the state-owned rail utility of South Africa, is desperate to get hold of Botswana coal. So I was present at a coal conference 2-3 weeks ago, where the CEO of Transnet mentioned that Botswana will be linked to South Africa's Richards Bay port, which is an additional port. It's a dedicated coal port. I think it's the top 5 in the world within 6 years, which will mean that at the moment we can export roughly up to 6 million tons per annum on the existing rail, which could go up to 20 million tons. But on that dedicated heavy haul line, we're looking at a minimum of 40 million tons that will be allocated to Botswana. So it's a game changer. If you're looking at, say the coal price is roughly $80 a ton, so if you're doing 40 million tons per annum, you can imagine the revenues that will be generated for the government. And the last significant thing that's happened recently, this was 3 to 4 weeks ago, Botswana and Namibia signed a bilateral agreement for the development of the Trans-Kalahari Railway Line. And this is strategic because what it will mean for Botswana is that it won't just rely on routes of export via South Africa or Mozambique. It will add another avenue out of where Botswana is now to end users either in Europe or in Asia. So in terms of the export market as well, we are well positioned, but on top of that, the sector continues to develop. Now, where I'll go now, just to close things off, is to mention what we're doing now. When we came last year, we were actually still drilling on our project, still doing, seeing where we had water, whether we had water, starting on environmental studies. that has all been completed. In fact, last year the only milestone we didn't hit was the Mauritius listing that was done now. But where we are now is really focused on the monetization of the assets. So this is converting the coal that we know we have in the ground to money. So from the mine side of things, we'll finish our resource modeling. We now have our consultants doing our mine design, our mine engineering. There was a moment we had in one of our regular sessions with our feasibility consultants where Alan Craig, our chairman, had to point out the difference between mine engineering and mining engineering. One is designing the mine and one is designing the underground or the related infrastructure such as power, water, etc. that goes underground or in an open pit. So we have now reached the stage where we're finalizing our mine designs, our surface infrastructure, and we're really looking at how best we're going to process this product on the mine side. On the power station side, we completed a transmission study in January this year, and really what we're saying is that we wanted to find out how we evacuate our power to the neighboring countries or even internally. And fortunately for us, as I pointed out, we're well positioned. And funny enough, which was quite a surprise to me, is that the actual power transmission costs are relatively low. So if you're looking at, say, you generate your power at the power station, your transmission costs will be 2 to 4% of that power generation cost. So what that means is some guy in Namibia buying power from us, then we have to pay 2% more than if we're selling to a guy in Botswana, which is quite significant. Because if we're to move coal that same distance, you might find that the transport cost of that coal could end up being 100% plus of the actual cost to mine. So going back to my point with coal, you want to move it if you can, beneficiate where it is and deliver a beneficiated product. In terms of power station design and selection, we also selected PV Power, which is a globally renowned group. The real name is Parsons Brigham Corp, and they successfully designed and operated and built several power stations globally. In fact, they've both worked on a number in South Africa and in Botswana. And in terms of the financial modeling, which again is key, what we have said is that we want to focus on getting a very low output power price. So we're going to work backwards from what we believe is a very competitive power price and work out what kind of mining costs we need to get and make sure that we're below that. Two other key areas in our studies, as again I mentioned, we have a lot of groundwater, and what we are doing now, we've completed a water pre-feasibility study which shows abundant groundwater from existing water wells and boreholes. So what we need to do now is move to the next phase, which is doing what we call the pump tests and doing some additional holes in order to delineate a water reserve which we can ring fence with the government. Unfortunately for us, we don't really have competition in the area that we are, so we're quite happy about that. And in terms of our environmental studies, I mentioned that we comments on the mine, but I did mention that we're combining that with doing environmental studies for the power station. And what that means is that we can deliver both products simultaneously. Hopefully for the mine definitely by the end of this year, but for the power station it will take slightly longer. So in the coming months, again, every year when we talk to people, we tell them where we intend to go. So these are our short-term milestones, and there are two types of milestones. There's the milestone that are within your grasp, your own control, which is doing the work, delineating the resource, building a power station, etc. And then there are the milestones which require negotiations with third parties, which are a bit more difficult to tell how long it will take. So in terms of our milestones here, in terms of the mine, feasibility studies, that's within our control. Environmental impact assessments, that's us. Water delineation, spending a bit of money. The offtake agreements, although the market there is going to require us to negotiate with third parties. So I wouldn't be able to put an exact time frame on that, but the positive thing is that the market exists. So just in closing there, our main asset is Chava as a world-class asset. We remain dedicated to producing power. We are going to start at 300 megawatts. Put it in context, that only requires roughly 1.5 million tons run-of-mine coal, so you only mine 1.5 million tons per annum of coal. So even at that stage, 300 megawatts, which is, I think it's about 60–70% of what Mauritius uses, somewhere there. We're looking at potentially over 100 years of mine life. So again, there's a lot of coal there. Although to put that in perspective, South Africa itself uses 45,000 megawatts of power per annum. So in the context of South Africa and the region, it's a fairly small amount of power that we'll be looking at. Demand for Botswana coal is robust, it remains strong, and interestingly enough, the new entrance into the market really now has been the majors. We've seen Jindal out of India coming 2 years ago and filed one of our peers for, I think it was 120 million US. And we've seen Anglo Coal coming into the market, getting some deposits there. So it's quite encouraging. Whereas before it was mainly smaller companies, the big boys are now starting to get involved. And as for us at Shumba Coal, we remain committed to building sustainable coal production in Botswana, but for the benefit of the region. And with that, I'll say thank you very much for listening to our story. And we'll now do some questions.